The silver ships appeared in Earth's sky on a quiet Tuesday morning. They hung there like giant mirrors reflecting the clouds, making no sound and taking no action. The world held its breath, and James Reed, Earth's top diplomat, straightened his tie for the 10th time as he waited in the United Nations building. The aliens had chosen New York for their first meeting. They called themselves the Galactic Coalition, an alliance of 32 spacefaring species. When they finally descended from their ships, everyone gasped. The aliens were beautiful in a strange way, tall, graceful beings that seemed to float rather than walk. Their ambassador, Tel, stood nearly 9 feet tall, with silvery skin that sparkled under the lights. "Your world is unusual," Tel said, looking down at James. "The gravity here is quite uncomfortable for us." The alien shifted his weight, his movements showing clear discomfort. 2 other coalition members behind him wore what looked like mechanical support suits. James noticed how the aliens seemed to struggle with every step. Their bodies were slim and delicate, built for worlds where everything weighed less. Even speaking seemed to tire them in Earth's gravity. Yet despite their obvious difficulty, they carried themselves with an air of superiority that made James's jaw clench. "We find it curious that intelligent life evolved in such extreme conditions," Tel continued. His translator made the words sound pleasant, but James caught the hint of disdain. "Your bodies are so dense and compact, almost primitive in design." The negotiations lasted 3 days. The coalition offered Earth membership in their alliance, along with access to their advanced technology. But there were conditions. Humans would start at the bottom of their hierarchy. They would need to prove themselves worthy of full membership, and their role would initially be limited to basic tasks. "Your people will need extensive modifications to serve on coalition ships," Tel explained, gesturing at the holographic displays showing sleek spacecraft. "Your muscle mass is inefficient for modern space travel, but we can help you overcome these limitations." James watched his fellow humans around the table. Some looked angry at the condescension, others excited by the technology being offered. He thought about declining, about telling these arrogant aliens to leave, but he could see the bigger picture. This was humanity's chance to reach the stars. "We accept your offer," James said, keeping his voice steady. "But we have one condition of our own. We want positions in your military academy. If we're joining your coalition, we want to help defend it." Tel's expression shifted to what might have been amusement. "Of course. Though I must warn you, our combat systems are quite advanced. They require mental acuity rather than physical prowess." The agreement was signed the next day. Within weeks, the first human volunteers began training for space service. The coalition provided gravity adjusters to make their ships comfortable for their new human allies, but many humans found them disorienting. They preferred to stay in normal gravity, much to the aliens' confusion. The coalition members watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern as humans adapted to space life. They noticed how humans could easily lift loads that would strain their own species, even with mechanical assistance. They saw humans running laps around space station tracks while their own people glided by in mobility suits, but they dismissed these observations as irrelevant. "Physical strength is a relic of primitive evolution," Tel told his superiors. "These humans will learn. They will adapt to our ways or remain in the lower ranks. Either way, they pose no threat to the established order." But not everyone shared Tel's dismissive attitude. Some coalition scientists began studying human physiology with growing interest. They couldn't understand how humans could function so well in what they considered crushing gravity. They ran tests, collected data, and filed reports that mostly went unread. As the first month of Earth's membership drew to a close, James sat in his new office in the coalition's headquarters. The gravity was set to Earth normal at his request, which meant few aliens visited him. He looked out at the star-filled view and smiled slightly. Let them underestimate humanity, he thought. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. What no one in the coalition realized was that humanity's primitive adaptation to high gravity would soon become more valuable than all their advanced technology combined. But that revelation was still to come. And for now, humans remained the curiosity of the galaxy, stocky, strong, and seemingly primitive creatures from a heavy world. Mark Thompson stood at the entrance of the Galactic Military Academy, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The massive building floated in space, its crystal spires reaching out like frozen lightning. Back on Earth, he had been a champion weightlifter, but here, that seemed to count for nothing. The orientation hall was filled with beings from across the galaxy. Most of them were tall and willowy, their bodies adapted to worlds where everything weighed less. Mark felt like a bull in a china shop as he made his way through the crowd. He had refused to wear the gravity adjusters that the other humans used, preferring to stay strong for Earth normal conditions. "Ah, another human," the voice said. Mark turned to see a tall, blue-skinned alien instructor looking down at him. "I am Instructor Rill. You should know that here at the Academy, we focus on mental combat and tactical systems. Physical training is outdated." The first few weeks proved challenging, but not in the way Mark had expected. The physical tests that other species struggled with felt like a joke to him, while his classmates wheezed and strained to complete an obstacle course in standard gravity. Mark breezed through it. This earned him suspicious looks rather than respect. "Look at him, using brute force instead of proper technique," one of his classmates whispered during combat training. They were practicing with training robots, and Mark had just thrown one across the room when its shields failed. The instructor had not been pleased. "Thompson, this is not a wrestling match," Rill said sharply. "Modern combat requires finesse. Your Earth methods have no place here." But Mark noticed how the robot remained broken, despite all the proper technique others had used. The academic classes were different. Mark struggled with the advanced physics and tactical theories that his alien classmates seemed to grasp easily. But he noticed something interesting. Many of their combat scenarios assumed that physical combat was impossible. Everything depended on shields, energy weapons, and automated systems. "What happens if the shields fail?" Mark asked during one tactical session. The question earned him laughs from his classmates. "The shields don't fail," Rill answered confidently. "And if they did, we have backup systems." Physical combat died out centuries ago in civilized space. During their free time, Mark and the other human cadets gathered in their own section of the training area. They had set it to Earth gravity and continued their physical training. The aliens watched them with a mixture of curiosity and disgust as they lifted weights and practiced hand-to-hand combat. One day, Mark was bench pressing when Rill walked in. The instructor watched him lift weights that would crush most coalition species. "I don't understand," Rill said. "Why maintain such inefficient muscle mass? Our suits and systems can provide all the strength needed." Mark sat up and wiped his face with a towel. "On Earth, we have a saying. It's better to have and not need than to need and not have." Rill dismissed this as primitive thinking, but Mark caught him watching the human cadets more closely after that. The instructor seemed puzzled by their endurance, their ability to keep fighting long after his other students had tired. The breaking point came during the midterm trials. The Academy ran a combat simulation with increased gravity to test emergency protocols. While most cadets relied on their mechanical suits, Mark and the other humans operated nearly normally. They completed the course with the highest scores in Academy history. "This is unprecedented," one of the review board members said, "but ultimately irrelevant. No modern combat takes place in such conditions." Mark wanted to argue, but he kept quiet. He had learned that the coalition species were set in their ways. They had spent so long depending on their technology that they couldn't imagine any other way of fighting. As he lay in his bunk that night, Mark thought about Earth's history. How many empires had fallen because they couldn't adapt? How many victories had gone to those who were underestimated? He smiled in the darkness, thinking of the looks on his classmates' faces during the trial. They still didn't understand what humans could do, but someday they would. Someday soon, they would have to. The emergency alarms blared through the academy's halls. Red lights flashed as students rushed to their assigned positions. Another pirate attack had struck a coalition outpost, the third one this month. This time, they had taken over an entire mining station in the Outer Rim. Mark sat in the tactical room with other senior cadets, watching the security footage. The pirates had done something new. They had somehow shut down the station's shield generators and automated defense systems. Then they had boarded the station, fighting hand-to-hand with the crew. "This is barbaric," Rill said, his face twisted with disgust as they watched the coalition security forces fall to the pirates' physical attacks. Using primitive combat methods like this, it goes against all civilized warfare protocols. But Mark noticed something different. He leaned forward, studying the pirates' movements. They were strong, coordinated, and clearly used to fighting in normal gravity. The coalition forces, dependent on their powered suits and energy weapons, hadn't stood a chance once their technology failed. "We need to change our training," Mark said during the review session. "We can't rely solely on shields and energy weapons. We need to be ready for close combat." The academy leaders dismissed his concerns. "This is an isolated incident," they said. "Our technology is superior. We will simply improve our shield systems." But Mark and the other human cadets knew better. During their private training sessions, they started practicing counterboarding tactics and close-quarter combat. Some non-human cadets even joined them, secretly admitting that Mark might be right. The warning signs kept coming. A week later, during a routine maintenance check, a support beam in the academy's lower levels collapsed. Mark and two other humans were nearby. Without thinking, Mark braced himself under the falling beam, his earth-strengthened muscles straining as he held up tons of metal that would have crushed the maintenance workers. "Impossible," one of the academy engineers said later, checking his instruments. "That beam weighs more than any sentient being should be able to support, even with mechanical assistance." But Mark's shoulders still ached from the proof that it was possible. The human cadets exchanged knowing looks during the investigation. Their strength wasn't just about showing off anymore. It could save lives. The pirates grew bolder. Reports came in of them disabling more coalition ships, always following the same pattern. First, the shields would fail. Then the automated systems would go dark. Finally, they would board and overwhelm the crews through physical force. "The coalition is losing face," Rill admitted to Mark one day. "Our traditional forces aren't trained for this kind of combat. They depend too much on their suits and weapons." Mark thought about the hours of physical training he and the other humans had maintained, even when everyone mocked them. "We could help," he said. "Humans are used to fighting without technological advantages." But the coalition military leadership remained stubborn. They increased shield power, added backup systems, and developed new energy weapons. None of it stopped the pirates, who seemed to have an answer for every technological solution. During combat simulations, the human cadets consistently outperformed their classmates in crisis scenarios. They could fight effectively even when systems failed, could carry injured teammates without powered suits, and could operate in high-gravity environments that left others helpless. "Your methods are still primitive," the combat instructors would say. "But we admit they have some practical applications." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Mark noticed more non-human cadets asking to join their training sessions. Even Rill began to show interest in learning basic hand-to-hand combat techniques. The final warning came when a distress call reached the academy. A coalition science vessel had gone dark near the Outer Rim. The pirates had taken everyone aboard hostage. This time, they demanded something new. They wanted the coalition to surrender an entire sector of space. As Mark listened to the emergency broadcast, he felt a chill run down his spine. These attacks weren't random anymore. They were getting more organized, more strategic. Someone or something was testing the coalition's defenses, probing for weaknesses. And they had found one. The Coalition's complete dependence on technology had left them vulnerable to the oldest form of combat in the galaxy. The only question was, would they realize it in time? The truth about the pirates became clear on a quiet morning at the Academy. The emergency sirens screamed to life as hundreds of massive warships appeared out of nowhere. They weren't pirates at all. They were the advanced scouts of an invasion force. The real enemy had finally shown themselves. They called themselves the Ravagers. Their ships were ugly, built for war rather than beauty, and they moved through the Coalition's defenses like they weren't even there. The Coalition's most powerful shield systems failed against their weapons. Their automated targeting systems couldn't lock onto the Ravager ships. Mark watched from the Academy's command center as the reports flooded in. Entire Coalition fleets were being destroyed or captured. The Ravagers used the same tactics as the pirates: disable the technology, board the ships, and overwhelm the crews with physical force. "This is impossible," one of the Coalition generals said, his hologram flickering in the command center. "Our technology is superior in every way. How can they defeat us so easily?" The answer came when they got their first clear look at a Ravager. A damaged scout ship had been captured, and its pilot was being held at a Coalition base. The creature inside was massive, with thick muscles and dense bones. It came from a heavy world, just like Earth. "They're like us," Mark said, studying the images. "They evolved on a high-gravity planet. That's why they can fight without powered suits. That's why they rely on physical combat." The Coalition leadership finally began to listen, but it was almost too late. The Ravagers had pushed deep into Coalition space, taking planet after planet. Traditional Coalition forces were helpless once their technology failed. They had forgotten how to fight without their machines. Mark and the other human cadets were called to an emergency meeting. The Academy leaders looked worried, their usual confidence gone. Even Rill seemed shaken. "We need your help," Rill admitted. "Your physical capabilities, your combat techniques. We need you to teach our forces how to fight without technology." But there wasn't time. The Ravagers were moving too fast, taking too much territory. The Coalition's mighty fleets were being reduced to space debris. Their advanced weapons were useless against an enemy that could simply power through their defenses and kill them with their bare hands. The Academy itself became a fortress as more Coalition forces retreated to its position. The human cadets worked around the clock, trying to teach basic combat skills to species that had relied on machines for centuries. It was like teaching someone to walk who had used a hover chair their entire life. "Your bodies are too weak," Mark told the Academy leaders. "You've depended on machines for too long. We need a different strategy." He proposed a new plan. The Coalition forces would focus on supporting roles, using what technologies still worked to help coordinate and plan. The humans would form the main combat units, backed up by Coalition tech and those aliens who had trained with them. "This goes against everything we believe in," one of the leaders said. "To rely on physical combat instead of advanced technology, it's a step backward." But they had no choice. The Ravagers were getting closer every day. Reports came in of their atrocities, entire populations enslaved, forced to work in high-gravity conditions that slowly killed them. The Coalition's civilization of comfort and technology was being crushed by brute force. Mark spent the last quiet night in the Academy's training room, preparing for what was coming. He could feel the change in the air. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Tomorrow, they would find out if humanity's primitive strength could stand against an enemy that had mastered both technology and physical power. The Ravagers had made a mistake, though. They had attacked the Coalition first, thinking these technological societies would be easy prey. They didn't know about Earth. They didn't know that humans had been training and preparing, maintaining their physical strength even while learning to use advanced technology. As Mark looked out at the stars, he saw the flash of Ravager ships entering the system. The Academy's alarms began to sound. The final battle for survival was about to begin, and humanity's greatest weakness, their heavy world evolution, was about to become their greatest strength. The Academy shook as the first Ravager ships opened fire. The beautiful crystal spires that had seemed so elegant now shattered like ice in a storm. Emergency lights flashed everywhere as students and staff rushed to their battle stations. This wasn't a drill anymore. This was survival. Mark ran through the corridors, gathering his fellow human cadets. They had trained for this, practicing combat techniques while others had laughed. Now those laughs had turned to desperate pleas for help. The Ravagers had already disabled the Academy's outer shields and were preparing to board. "Remember your training," Mark shouted to his team as they took up positions near the main docking areas. "They're strong like us, but they don't expect resistance. They think everyone here is weak and dependent on technology." The first explosion rocked the station as the Ravagers breached the hull. They came charging in, massive figures in dark armor. Just as Mark had predicted, they had disabled most of the Academy's defensive systems. The automatic weapons were silent. The security robots stood frozen. Even the gravity controls were locked at Earth normal, which was exactly what the humans wanted. Coalition security forces tried to fight back with their powered suits, but the Ravagers had some kind of energy weapon that shut them down. Without their technological advantages, the Coalition troops were helpless. That's when Mark gave the signal. The human cadets attacked from multiple directions, taking the Ravagers by surprise. For the first time, the invaders faced opponents who could match their physical strength. Mark tackled one of them, using his wrestling training to slam the alien warrior to the ground. Around him, other humans were engaging in hand-to-hand combat, fighting with a fury that shocked both the Ravagers and the watching Coalition members. "Keep pushing," Mark yelled as he ducked under a Ravager's swing and landed a solid punch to its midsection. They're not used to their opponents fighting back. The battle raged through the Academy's halls. The humans used everything they had learned, not just their strength, but their endurance and tactical training too. They turned corridors into choke points, used debris as weapons, and coordinated with the few working Coalition systems to trap and isolate Ravager groups. Rill watched from the command center, his eyes wide with disbelief. The humans were fighting the Ravagers to a standstill, something no Coalition force had managed before. More importantly, they were winning. "Impossible," he whispered as he watched Mark lift a fallen beam and use it to block a corridor, trapping several Ravagers. All this time, we thought their physical strength was a weakness, a sign of their primitive nature. We were wrong. The tide turned when the humans started capturing Ravager weapons. They didn't try to use them as guns. Instead, they used them as clubs, fighting in close quarters where their strength and agility gave them the advantage. The Ravagers, used to facing technologically dependent opponents, didn't know how to handle enemies who could match them blow for blow. After 3 hours of intense fighting, the remaining Ravagers retreated. The Academy's halls were damaged and scarred, but they had held. For the first time since the invasion began, the Ravagers had been beaten back. In the aftermath, Mark stood in the command center, breathing heavily but standing proud. Coalition leaders from across the galaxy were calling in, demanding to know how the Academy had repelled the attack. The answer was simple, but it shook their fundamental beliefs about warfare and civilization. "Technology is a tool," Mark explained to the Coalition Council, "not a crutch. You forgot how to fight without it." "We never did." The council members looked at each other, their previously dismissive attitudes replaced with newfound respect. The humans hadn't just defended the Academy. They had shown the Coalition a way to fight back against the Ravagers. As cleanup crews worked to repair the damage, Mark found Rill staring at the human cadets who were helping move debris. "I owe you an apology," Rill said quietly. "We all do. We thought Earth's gravity made you primitive. Instead, it made you strong enough to save us all." Mark looked at his former instructor and smiled. "The real strength isn't in our muscles," he said. "It's in remembering that no matter how advanced you become, you should never forget the basics. Sometimes the old ways are still the best ways." The victory at the Academy changed everything. Within days, ships from across the coalition arrived at Earth. Their leaders had finally realized that humanity's physical strength wasn't primitive. It was essential for their survival. They needed humans to teach them how to fight the Ravagers. Mark found himself promoted to combat instructor, teaching coalition forces alongside other humans. The Academy's training grounds were moved to Earth, where the higher gravity would help build up the aliens' strength. It was strange to see the once proud coalition species struggling with simple exercises that human children could do. Again, Mark called out as a group of alien soldiers attempted push-ups in Earth's gravity. Your bodies will adapt. Ours did over thousands of years. You have to do it in months. Some couldn't handle it. Their bodies weren't made for such strain. But others surprised everyone. Rill, who had once mocked human physical training, now spent hours in the gym. His tall, slim frame began to show definition. He could walk in Earth's gravity without a suit. It hurts, Rill said during a break, his breathing heavy. But for the first time, I feel real, not dependent on machines. The coalition's military strategy changed completely. They stopped relying solely on shields and energy weapons. Now they had special forces trained in physical combat, ready for when the technology failed. Humans led these units, teaching the aliens not just how to fight, but how to think without technology. Earth became the center of the coalition's military training. Ships arrived daily, bringing more recruits eager to learn. The once dismissed planet was now the most important military asset in the war against the Ravagers. Your world is teaching us to be strong again, one coalition leader told Mark. We forgot that the body itself is a weapon, a tool that can't be shut down like our machines. The Ravagers noticed the change. Their easy victories stopped. Now when they disabled a coalition ship's technology, they found crews ready and able to fight back. Their boarding parties met strong resistance. Some even retreated when they realized humans were aboard. Mark watched from the command center as reports came in from across the galaxy. Coalition forces were pushing the Ravagers back, using a combination of technology and physical combat. The enemy's main advantage was gone. They don't know what to do, Mark explained during a strategy meeting. They expected to face weak, technology-dependent victims. Instead, they're facing warriors who can fight with or without machines. The coalition ships were redesigned too. They now had backup systems that worked without power, physical weapons alongside energy ones, and training areas to keep crews strong. Earth's engineers helped create hybrid technology that combined the best of both worlds. In space battles, the new strategy proved devastating. When Ravager weapons knocked out coalition shields, they found themselves facing ships that could still fight back. When they boarded coalition vessels, they met crews who could match their strength. A month after the Academy battle, Mark stood on a podium at the New Earth Defense Center. Before him were thousands of coalition troops, their bodies stronger now after training in Earth's gravity. Among them were hundreds of humans ready to lead the fight. We're not just teaching you to be stronger, Mark told them. We're teaching you to be survivors. Technology can fail. Weapons can break. But as long as you can stand and fight, you're never defeated. The Coalition Council, watching via hologram, nodded in agreement. Their once dismissive attitude toward humans had been replaced by deep respect. They had learned that true civilization wasn't about replacing physical capabilities with technology. It was about combining both to become stronger. As the troops began their daily training, Mark saw something that would have been impossible just months ago. Humans and aliens working together, learning from each other, becoming stronger together. The Ravagers had wanted to destroy the Coalition by exposing its weakness. Instead, they had forced it to discover a new kind of strength. And somewhere out in space, the Ravagers were learning a hard lesson. They weren't the only ones who knew how to fight in the old ways. Humanity had kept that knowledge alive, and now they were teaching it to the galaxy. 3 months after the first humans began training Coalition forces, the Ravagers launched their final attack. They threw everything they had at the Coalition's core worlds, expecting to find the same weak, technology-dependent enemies they had first encountered. They were wrong. The Coalition fleet that met them was different now. Every ship had human officers aboard. Every crew had trained in Earth's gravity. When the Ravagers tried their usual tactics of disabling technology, they found themselves facing opponents who were ready for hand-to-hand combat. Mark commanded the defense of the Coalition capital from the bridge of Earth's first space battleship. The ship was a new design, combining Coalition technology with human military principles. It had backup systems that could be operated manually, physical weapons along with energy ones, and corridors designed for close-quarter combat. "They're trying to board us," his tactical officer reported as Ravager ships moved alongside them. "Just like before." "Let them come," Mark said, nodding to his crew. "That's what we trained for." The battle that followed would be remembered for generations. When the Ravagers burst through airlocks, they found Coalition soldiers fighting alongside humans, matching them strength for strength. The invaders' confidence turned to confusion, then to fear, as they realized their physical advantage was gone. In the ship's main corridor, Mark found himself face to face with a Ravager commander. The alien was huge, its armor scarred from countless victories. But as they fought, the Ravager discovered something unexpected. A human could match its strength, and Earth's heavy gravity had given Mark even better endurance. "Your kind was supposed to be weak," the Ravager growled in its harsh language as they grappled, dependent on machines like the others. Mark managed to lock the alien in a hold he had learned years ago on Earth. "You should have checked our gravity first," he said, before ending the fight with a decisive strike. Throughout the Coalition fleet, similar scenes played out. The Ravagers found themselves overwhelmed by crews who could fight as well as they could, while still using advanced technology when needed. It was a combination they had never faced before, and they didn't know how to counter it. The battle lasted 2 days, but in the end, the Coalition emerged victorious. The remaining Ravager ships fled, their aura of invincibility shattered. They had expected to find easy prey, but instead found equals who could match their strength while wielding superior technology. In the aftermath, the Coalition Council gathered on Earth, the first time they had ever met on a heavy gravity world. Many of them could now walk unassisted in Earth's gravity, their bodies transformed by months of training. They had learned that physical strength and advanced technology could coexist, making them stronger than either alone. Tell, the ambassador who had once dismissed humans as primitive, stood before the council. His silver skin had taken on a harder edge, shaped by exercise in Earth's gravity. "We owe humanity an apology," he announced. "We thought their world's heavy gravity made them primitive. Instead, it made them the teachers we needed. They reminded us of strengths we had forgotten." The council voted unanimously to make Earth the headquarters of the Coalition's military forces. They also appointed Mark as the first human supreme commander of Coalition defense, a position that would have been unthinkable just months ago. "The Ravagers taught us all a lesson," Mark said in his acceptance speech. "Technology is valuable, but it can fail. True strength comes from being ready for anything, from never forgetting the basics while reaching for the stars." After the ceremony, Mark found Rill in the Academy's New Earth campus. His former instructor was teaching a class of alien cadets, showing them how to fight without powered suits. The sight would have been impossible a few months ago. "Did you ever imagine it would end like this?" Rill asked, looking out at the training grounds where humans and aliens worked together. "Us learning to be strong like you." Mark watched a group of Coalition children playing in Earth's gravity, their bodies already adapting to the heavier world. "Maybe this was always how it had to be," he said. "Sometimes you have to go backward to move forward. Sometimes the old ways and the new ways need to work together." The sun set over the Academy, its light catching on the crystal and steel of Coalition ships in orbit. Earth was no longer the primitive heavy world on the edges of Coalition space. It had become the heart of a new kind of civilization, one that had learned to balance physical strength with technological power, and was stronger for it.